Black and Gold Nation, are you ready? Because what's happening right now goes far beyond just another win. It's the transformation of how the entire world sees the Steelers. Those who doubted for years are now backpedaling, and the narrative around this team is being rewritten before our very eyes. If you believe greatness is not up for debate, hit that like button to strengthen the nation. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you trust that this new version of the Steelers can silence the critics once and for all? Today isn't just about numbers, it's about respect. So buckle up, because this story is about to change the way everyone looks at the black and gold. Go Steelers! Steelers fans, you will not believe what is happening in the national media right now. For years, analysts have brushed off the Pittsburgh Steelers, questioning the offensive line, doubting the quarterback situation, and writing this team off as nothing more than a tough defense with no real shot at contending. But suddenly, after what the world witnessed in Dublin against the Minnesota Vikings, everything has changed, and the shift is so dramatic that even some of the Steelers' harshest critics are backpedaling. This isn't just another story about a win in early October. This is about the perception of the black and gold, about how the narrative around Aaron Rodgers and this franchise is being rewritten in real time. And trust me, once you hear what was said, you'll want to stick with me all the way to the end. Colin Cowherd, a name Steelers Nation knows well for often dismissing this team, has flipped the script. Before the season began, he compared Pittsburgh's situation to a more organized Jets, mocking the offensive line, dismissing the receiving depth, and flat-out refusing to buy into the idea that Rodgers and the Steelers were built to win. He went as far as to say that Pittsburgh was like McDonald's compared to Burger King. Organized, sure, but still fast food. In other words, nothing special. But after Dublin, after Rodgers and the Steelers dismantled the Vikings, suddenly, Cowherd is singing a very different tune. What changed? The performance spoke louder than words. Cowherd admitted he was blown away. 130 rushing yards, Rodgers delivering pinpoint passes with only 4 incompletions, and an offense that, in his words, finally looked like it could win a playoff game. For someone who has said for years that the Steelers' offense was unwatchable, to hear him admit that this version of Pittsburgh felt different, felt dangerous, sends shockwaves across the league. He even called out Pro Football Focus for ranking Rodgers near the very bottom of all NFL quarterbacks, saying it was flat-out disrespectful to the way he's been playing.
Think about that for a second. PFF had Rodgers graded at 50.4, 37th out of 38 quarterbacks, placing him below names like J.J. McCarthy, Carson Wentz, Jake Browning, even Russell Wilson and Joe Flacco, 2 quarterbacks who have already been benched this season. Cowherd pushed back hard, pointing to Rodgers' efficiency, his command of the offense, and most importantly, his ability to get the ball out quickly and in stride to playmakers. He compared Rodgers not to the flashy Steph Curry type, but to Chris Paul, a steady, precise veteran who makes everything around him click. And when you watch plays like that touchdown to DK Metcalf in Dublin, you see exactly what he's talking about. That ball had to be perfect, and it was. Without that precision, it's just another incompletion. With it, it's 6 points. But it's not just Cowherd backing off his preseason stance. Another national voice, Dan Orlovsky, came out after the Dublin win and compared Pittsburgh's offensive performance to the Kansas City Chiefs. Let that sink in. The same Steelers offense that many thought would struggle all season was being mentioned in the same breath as the reigning juggernaut of the NFL. Orlovsky loved the jumbo formations, the yards after catch, the way they used multiple tight ends and extra linemen to establish balance. He said, that is 2025 football in the NFL. And when you think about it, he's right. The Steelers didn't just run an offense in Week 4, they showcased a formula for winning football in the modern era. Physical, creative, explosive when needed, and efficient throughout. On defense, it was just as impressive. Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin put together a game plan that confused and suffocated Minnesota for 3 quarters. Wide 9 alignments for T.J. Watt and Nick Herbig, disguised blitzes from linebackers and defensive backs, and the return of Deshaun Elliott gave them more flexibility to get aggressive. The result? A defense that looked more like one of Brian Flores' exotic schemes than anything Pittsburgh had rolled out in recent years. And let's not overlook the fact that it worked against a legitimate Vikings team, not some bottom feeder. Still, not everyone in the media is ready to buy in. Nick Wright, who has been anti-Steelers for years, refuses to jump on the bandwagon. Even after Rodgers went 18-for-22, orchestrating the fastest average time to throw game of his career and putting points on the board with authority, Wright clung to his preseason prediction that the Steelers could collapse with a 4-game losing streak. He even suggested before the Dublin game that it might be Rodgers' last meaningful start, warning that the Vikings' pass rush would end him. Instead, Rodgers thrived. and Pittsburgh walked out with a win that silenced doubters, at least the reasonable ones. But right, he's doubling down, and maybe that's exactly the kind of fuel this team needs. The bottom line is this: the Steelers are 3-1, and national voices are being forced to acknowledge what we've been seeing all along. Rodgers is efficient. The run game is coming alive. The playmakers are making plays after the catch. And the defense? It's as nasty as ever. For years, Pittsburgh has been treated like a team stuck in neutral, but the performance in Dublin may have been the turning point, the moment when the league was forced to open its eyes. Now here's the question for you, Steelers Nation. Are you buying this shift? Are you ready to say that this team, with Aaron Rodgers at the helm and Mike Tomlin pulling the strings, is a legitimate contender, not just for the playoffs, but for something bigger? Or are you still taking a cautious approach, waiting to see if this formula holds up over the grind of the season? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear from you. Because one thing's for sure, the Steelers just changed the conversation, and the NFL is watching. And here's where it gets even more fascinating, because what's happening around the Steelers isn't just about one game in Dublin or about Aaron Rodgers proving doubters wrong. This is about a cultural shift that feels like it's starting to take hold in Pittsburgh, and you can see it not just in the results but in the way the team is being talked about across the league. For so long, the conversation has been predictable. The defense is solid, but the offense can't hang, or they'll win some games, but they're not built for January. Now, suddenly, the storylines are flipping. Analysts who mock this team are finding themselves scrambling for new explanations. Take Dan Orlovsky again. His comparison of the Steelers' offense to the Kansas City Chiefs isn't something you throw out lightly. He talked about the 6 offensive lineman sets, the multiple tight ends, the yards after catch dominance, and he called it 2025 football. Think about that phrase. He didn't just say it looked good. He said it looked like the future. And when an analyst like Orlovsky, who has spent his career breaking down quarterback play and offensive design, labels what Pittsburgh is doing as cutting edge, it's a signal to the rest of the NFL that this team isn't just surviving, it's innovating. And innovation is exactly what fans have been craving. For years, Steelers Nation has watched other teams take risks, get creative, and play with offensive flair, while Pittsburgh seemed stuck trying to grind out wins the hard way. Now, finally, we're seeing a mix of both worlds: physical, smash-mouth football paired with smart, forward-thinking schemes that put playmakers in position to do damage. DK Metcalf's 80-yard touchdown wasn't just about his size and speed. It was about design, timing, and execution. That's what's different now. Meanwhile, the defense is sending its own message. With TJ Watt leading the charge, Nick Herbig making noise, and Deshaun Elliott back in the secondary, the Steelers are showing a willingness to disguise coverages and create chaos that feels reminiscent of their most dominant years. The adjustments against Minnesota, the wide 9 looks, the disguised blitzes, weren't just wrinkles. They were statements. Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin showed that they're willing to adapt and attack, not just line up and play the same old style. That adaptability is exactly what you need if you want to go toe-to-toe with the NFL's best in the postseason. But let's not ignore the other side of this conversation, the skeptics. Nick Wright, for instance, is holding onto his narrative like it's a lifeline. He predicted Rodgers might not even finish the Vikings game, warning that the offensive line would collapse and Rodgers would get destroyed. Instead, Rodgers delivered his fastest average time-to-throw performance of his entire career. Quick, decisive, and accurate. The kind of quarterback play that neutralizes a pass rush and turns pressure into opportunity. But even with that, Wright refuses to give Pittsburgh credit, saying he doesn't trust them and suggesting a losing streak is always just around the corner. And honestly, maybe that's not the worst thing. For years, the Steelers have thrived when people counted them out. Pittsburgh has never been a team that feeds off national praise. It feeds off disrespect. It feeds off being told they can't, and then proving that they can. If Nick Wright and others want to keep doubting, that might be exactly the fire this locker room needs to keep its edge. Now, let's bring this into the bigger picture, the AFC North. The Ravens have injuries piling up, the Bengals are struggling to find rhythm, and the Browns are as inconsistent as ever. Suddenly, that wide-open division phrase doesn't feel like hype. It feels like reality. Pittsburgh is 3-1, and if this version of the Steelers continues to grow, they're not just players in the race, they're in position to control it. Think about the implications of that. For the first time in years, it doesn't feel like Pittsburgh has to settle for sneaking into the playoffs as a wild card. It feels like the door to the division title, and maybe even more, is wide open. But here's the most intriguing part of all this: Aaron Rodgers. PFF has him buried near the bottom of the league in their grades, but the eye test tells a completely different story. He's efficient, He's limiting mistakes, and he's maximizing his playmakers. He's playing within the structure of the offense while also elevating it with experience and precision. Is he the flashiest quarterback in the league? No. But does he need to be? Absolutely not. Rodgers doesn't have to be Steph Curry. He just has to be Chris Paul, steady, smart, and exactly what this roster needs to bring everything together. So now the real question is this. Do you believe this version of the Steelers is built to last? Was Dublin just one great performance, or was it a preview of what's to come all season? We're not talking about a lucky win here. We're talking about a formula, strong defense, efficient quarterback play, creative offensive design, and playmakers who know how to finish drives. That's not smoke and mirrors. That's winning football. And this is where I want to turn it to you, Steelers Nation. After watching this 3-1 start, after seeing Rodgers silence doubters in Dublin, after hearing national analysts admit that this team looks different, are you convinced? Are you buying in right now? Or are you waiting for more proof before you call this team a true contender? Drop your thoughts below. Is this just the beginning of something special, or are the Steelers still one big test away from proving they belong in the conversation with the NFL's elite? Because one thing's for sure, the entire league is starting to pay attention, and the Steelers have their chance to seize this moment. And here's the thing. When you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, you start to realize how massive this moment could be for the Steelers. It isn't just about Rodgers showing he's still got it. It's about Mike Tomlin once again proving why he has never had a losing season and why his steady leadership matters more than the critics will ever admit. Because let's be honest, this team wasn't supposed to look this sharp, this early. The offensive line wasn't supposed to hold up. The new offensive wrinkles weren't supposed to click. The Rodgers to Metcalf connection